Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fresh from the Studio. Today we have Women in Their Work artists Meg Aubrey, Danielle Benda, and Ellen Ray. The way the program works is each artist will share with us their studio, upcoming projects, works in progress for a quick 10-minute tour or presentation. We'll go from one artist to the next, and at the end, we'll have time for your questions and comments. Feel free throughout the presentations to put your questions in the chat, and we'll get back together as a group and have a discussion. Today, we're going to start with an artist who's also a Women in Their Work alumni artist. She had an exhibition in our Lavaca gallery in 2018, and her name's Meg Aubrey. So I will stop sharing and you can take it away.
Okay, let me start. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you to Diane and Allie. And my name is Meg Aubrey. And as you might be able to tell from my work, I did begin my career as an illustrator. I returned to school to get an MFA in painting, taught in Atlanta, and now I'm an associate professor of art and design at Texas A&M University Corpus Christi. My MFA work centered around suburbia, and it's where I grew up and it's where I raised my children. I no longer live in suburbia, but it's still just really a very interesting thing for me to deal with and talk about. And my work is oil on canvas and panel. So today I am not in my studio because I do not have good Wi-Fi there. I have a nice space on campus that was provided, which I love. And I almost like that I don't have Wi-Fi there because when I go there, I only can paint. I can't really communicate with people, and it's just part of the campus that they didn't have Wi-Fi on. So it's separate from my office. So I like it. So it's that time to work without distraction, place to think, place to make mistakes, and to solve problems. And over this past year and a half, I feel like at least more than half of the work I've made has not been working, but that's okay. It's just kind of trial and error. And that studio is that private place you can do that. So I want to start with this piece. This was one of my pieces for my Women at Work show, and it is large. It's 90 inches by 50 inches. It's called Surrender. And this is my suburban woman. It's a self-portrait, but it's also the portrait of the women that are around me. So like I said, I grew up there and I raised my children there. What I consider my work is I have an insider view to the world of suburbia, but it's also I have an outsider's critique because I no longer live there, and I find it really fascinating when I go back. And the things that I accepted as normal don't look normal anymore. It's a lot about privilege, about being separated from like the dirty side of life and the bad things, you'll probably have heard the term the bubble. That's a lot of what it kind of feels like a bubble. And that's what it felt like to me once I stepped back from it. But there's lots of trouble underneath. My woman, she's always usually has sunglasses and she's got that uniform of suburbia. So during the pandemic, doing some work, and I'm really interested now in this consumerism that is so prevalent everywhere, but certainly in suburbia. And once the pandemic hit, that didn't stop consumerism at all. And it's just kind of like what we seem like we exist for now. And like, what is our culture? And it feels like it's buying stuff. So I'm interested in exploring more of that. The green and the flats, that's really important in my work as well. Like I have rendered figures, but I'm really into this like very flat background. And the green is sort of a idea about suburbia and perfection. And I also do the whites as well. So during pandemic, I was trying different things, and we're now living in Texas, thinking about big sky and the open and the empty, which is kind of my theme in suburbia. But so I started to play with some landscapes as well. And my work has taken on this other meaning since COVID has come into play, this emptiness and this loneliness or vapid background is sort of may lend itself to what's happening, that feeling everybody was having during COVID. So that landscape in Texas is where that big sky as well, that vastness and that emptiness, but you'll see I still bring in sort of the RV and that touch of life. And I'm also kind of interested in this RV culture. It's not inexpensive to do. And I recently had a friend that went and rented a RV and went out west, and it cost an absolute fortune. They were saying it could have gone to Europe for the price that they paid for it, but it was wonderful. But it's not certainly people without money doing it at this level on these very expensive machines. So again, that consumerism and suburban. So the dollhouse interiors, this is something I've been working on for a couple of years. I'm working on now as well. It's the interior of the suburban world. And I didn't want to show the actual interiors. So I found dollhouse furniture at some point in a toy store. And I was just really attracted to like the bright candy color and the plastic and the shiny nature of it. And it just felt like the interiors that, not necessarily the colors, but sort of the created world that suburban life is a little bit. You go into the houses kind of look the same, the interiors kind of look the same, the people dress similarly. And so I started playing with these objects and rearranging them in still lifes in my studio, and then placing them into the actual world. And it also talks about consumerism and the things we choose and the choices that are made for us. Like, are we picking our interiors and our furniture and our clothes, or is IKEA picking them, or is West Elm picking them? Well, I'm not sure. And I'm part of that because my tastes keep changing. And is it because my tastes are changing, or there's this force that's telling me what I like? And then also the unseen hands are another part of this dollhouse furniture set, where the unseen hands are setting up this furniture for us. And so there's that feel from there. So I really enjoy working with the furniture. This is another piece. And that woman has come back in. She's this sort of iconic housewife feature, and it's kind of a semi self-portrait in a way, not actually my image, but just who I felt I was. And the sunglasses kind of hiding behind the sunglasses. But again, this is like rearranging this furniture within this world. And this one, I brought in this sort of flood water from outside. And I think I did that because I was in Texas and we were in a hurricane. And so those things are kind of coming in and out. And I'm placing them together and kind of seeing what happens with them. So again, the chairs, the objects will keep kind of showing up in different still lifes. And I really like that idea of taking things in the studio and rearranging them. And these chairs are sitting on, I have this piece of AstroTurf, which is big, and these chairs are tiny, so that when I placed them on the AstroTurf, they just couldn't even stand upright. They were just, unmoored in it, almost like in water. And I liked that feel of what was happening with them. They're off-centered and they're not stable, and they're repeating as well. And this is a piece, it's called Game Mom. And I'm doing a new series it's called Game. And it's just about, obviously kind of about the game of life, but this suburban soccer mom, she's another iconic person that I use in my work. And she's sort of waiting, she's watching. And so roles we play, but there's, as I said earlier, there's lots of trouble underneath. It's this like veneer of perfection and cleanliness and orderly that is very unstable. Especially if you live there, how unstable it really is. So it's this constant idea of trying to be and look perfect in a world that's extremely not perfect. And I have one last piece. This is just kind of, I'm playing with this as well. This is a fairly large painting. It's a medium, it's 30 by 40 inches. And I'm painting these tiny, I bought these little dollhouse food items. This item is probably 1 inch by 2 inches. So I blew it up in paint. And I like the look of it. It's that plastic glazed over look. And I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I'm interested in sort of playing with the idea of real and unreal. And I also love painting so much, like the act of painting, that I'll just try all kinds of things, especially at a larger scale, just to kind of mix that paint and get it on there and see if it starts the conversation. And like I said at the beginning, about half the stuff I've been making has not been working. So it's a work in progress. So that's what I have. And I will stop sharing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Meg, for sharing your new work with us.
You're welcome.
Next up is Houston-based Ellen Ray.
Well, hi. I am going to start off with just sharing some background about myself. But first, I do want to say thank you to Diane Sykes and Women in Their Work for inviting me to be a part of the Fresh from the Studio series. I started off as a painting and drawing student at University of North Texas in the mid-'80s. I got married and started my family really young. I then started a decorative arts business, which I ran in Dallas for about 20 years, basically an artist for hire. And while I really loved doing that work, I couldn't help but feel like my bigger art story had kind of passed me by. But in 2015, I moved to Houston. I enrolled at the Glassell School. While I was there, for 2 years, I was in their studio intensive block program. And that just had a huge impact on my work and on my life. And another thing that has had another factor that's had a big impact on me was that in 2013, I started a meditation practice, a daily meditation practice, which continues today. And it took me a while, but when I figured out that my meditation practice and my art practice were really just one practice, that just opened up this sort of thematic reservoir for me to explore. And I just kind of easily fell into this rhythm of making. So for the last several years, I've kind of made a study of connection, specifically the ways in which we connect to each other through genetics and also consciousness and through shared history. So I want to share one more thing. Along with meditation, another thing that has a big impact on me are the books that I read. So these are just a few that have had big impact on me in the last year. And so now I think it's a time for me to share my screen and go to the images. So I make both paintings and drawings, and I work on them simultaneously in my studio because they both require very different energy. But I'm going to start here with the drawings. All of the drawings are on paper. They are pastel and charcoal and graphite. And I like to set up this kind of velvety, hushed environment. And then I use this back and forth reductive, additive method to just kind of, grow the piece or conjure it into being. So this is a good one to get in close and kind of see the detail. With this series, I am exploring the commonalities across life forms. So I might see a structure that is, say, in bone, and then I find that same structure in plant fiber. Or maybe I find this perfect, mathematical form in a flower, and then see it again in a virus. So that is just always endlessly fascinating to me. And this is one of my latest drawings. It's called Evidence. And I was just hoping to make something that showed intelligence in a non-human form. So sometimes in meditations I get visuals, which is different from visions. In this case, I was doing a meditation of the vibrations of Om. And I was getting this great elliptical form vibration. And I became curious as to whether it would change the pattern if in a color immersive situation, environment. And it did. Okay, so we're now moving on to paintings. This is my most recent painting, and it's a little bit unusual in that it's on paper. I don't typically paint on paper. The drawings are on paper, but also this was a direct experience from meditation. Again, I don't really use meditation to like find imagery or get something to put into work, but occasionally I experienced that, and this was that one of those situations. The painting is titled "I Remember the Rain," and it's just told from the perspective of the tree. This is an ongoing series called Contemplations on Matter. So for my paintings, usually I start with jute fabric, and I mix a variety of mediums together and press it through and layer it on top until I get this really great surface that accepts both wet and dry medium, which I love. And it's wonderfully scalable. So like these are 12-inch by 12-inch. And then this one is almost 11 feet and almost 5 feet wide. And you can kind of see the scale better here, I think. Same scale here. This one I actually stitched 3 panels together here in the middle. So you will see in my work a lot of cellular structure, vibration patterns, microscopic imagery, sometimes the visuals that I get in meditation, which I was really exploring during the early days of the pandemic, because that was about all I felt like I could do. But you'll also see a lot of trees and root systems. The reason for that is that, you know, humans used to be very much a part of the natural world, but for centuries now, we have kind of severed that more and more, severed that connection. And I think it's entirely possible in our modern life for a child to be born, live their full-length life and die, and have never set foot in a wild space. And depending on their circumstances, maybe never even, you know, put a bare foot on a patch of grass. And that bothers me. So this is a painting called Earth Memory. Right now, there is so much research being done about what's going on underneath our feet in the mycorrhizal network, under the forest floor, but also under the tree in your, you know, in your front yard. There's just so much going on down there, so much science, and I believe so much mysticism happening under our feet and in the air around us. And so with my work, if I can just, I don't know, cause somebody to pause and notice the life or the being in the tree or the stars or the air around us or whatever, you know, I just think that maybe that's like a little stitch, like just a little step towards healing that separation. So lately I've been thinking about installations and how I can more directly open up a conversation between, you know, humans of the world and the plant life that surrounds us. And so I'm actively inviting an opportunity to do an immersive installation. But right now in my studio, I'm just kind of sketching with objects. That's kind of how I consider this. So this is set up in my studio. I'm calling it, oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. There we go. I'm calling it We Need to Talk. And it's kind of a passive aggressive invitation from the natural world to humans to have a seat and maybe remedy some of this separation. Oh, I forgot I put this in there. Okay, I knew that I would forget to tell you guys where you can see my work. It's ellenhray.com or on Instagram, ehray. And I'm going to stop screen sharing. And just to finish up, I'm going to turn my screen. You can see this little installation sketching of objects over there that's happening in my studio. And okay, that's it. I mean, you can see now what's happening in my head and in my studio. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your studio there at the end. That was a nice little surprise. And next up is Danielle Benda, I think one of our newest artist members, and the only one today who's based in Austin. So welcome, Danielle.
Thank you, and thank you, Diane, and the women and the work for giving me this opportunity. This is the first one actually featured, so I'm thankful for that. I'm Danielle Benda, and I was actually born and raised in Cameroon. So my first language is French. That's where I got the accent from. And I live in Austin, Texas. Actually, I'm coming with a background in IT, software engineering, and architecture. So, I mean, since I was young, I was always passionate about art and creating things like doing some little craft here and there. But for some reasons, a little tied to the tradition and where I grew up, I ended up following the IT or software engineering path until the artist side of me started like knocking on my head, like, hey, you need to give me more attention. So a few years ago, like in 2017, I started putting spending more time and putting more attention on creating a few pieces. And in general, my art works are really connected to my lifetime experience and also my passion as an artist. And each piece I create, I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit about my creative process. Each piece I create actually has a story behind, and that's the inspiration behind. And that falls in three different categories. So the first one is raising awareness on gender-based violence. I mean, I've been there, I know what that is, and I'm sure even looking at the statistic, there's a lot of women out there who are going through some sort of violence. Either they can't find help, or maybe there's help, but they don't even have the courage or the strength to go and ask for help. So some stories are my story, or my stories, or other people's stories. So it's just a way for me to raise awareness around the topic. That, hey, this is something really true. And if that can help any woman or anyone going through the same thing, finding the courage and the strength to get out of here, that would be a big win for me. The second category of inspiration behind my artwork is showcasing the African heritage. I'm from Africa. I know there's a lot of values in the Africa background and beauty, its strength. So I want to showcase that in some of my artwork. And I'm a big fan of international or cultural exchange between people, because I think that's it. I mean, having that cultural exchange mutual is really an opportunity for deeper and prolonged commitment between people. So I value that a lot. And the third category of the inspiration behind my artwork is just like positive and affirmative messages around social well-being and self well-being for each reader, maybe to find like a word that can inspire the person to be the better version of him or herself. So that's pretty much the inspirational stories behind my artwork. And the way I do it, and I'm going to start by showing this series I have. I call it the African fabric. And the African fabric, for me, there are two pieces actually, this one and the other one. And the difference between the two pieces is here, you're going to see that there are cowries here, cowrie shell, and here you're going to see that those are buttons. And the way that I actually align the different type of fabric is different. So the reason why I did this series was to showcase the value of African fabric, because back in the time, a lot of women in Africa, they were just quiet. So the African fabric was used actually back in the time for the woman to express her feelings. So in Africa, we have different designs. Most of the time when you see dark African fabric with a lot of dark color, something like that, that means maybe she's expressing, maybe that's for a funeral or for something very sad. But African fabrics with more bright colors, maybe it's something that we design for a more joyful event like a graduation or a wedding, something like that. So that's how African women back in the time used to express themselves through the patterns of the fabric they were wearing, instead of shutting down, because, you know, back in the time, women were kind of submissive. You can't talk, you have to absorb, something like that. So how can we express yourself? You can do that through whatever you are wearing. So that's the reason behind behind this series. And you can see right now, almost all of my artwork have some open space. I call it phase one for me. Phase one, which is openness, because I came from a dark place of sadness and tears and regret, and I healed, and now I'm ready to open myself to the world. Now, next month, I'm going to start with phase two, where all the open space will be more filled, and I call it, for me, just leave. Meaning, now that I'm ready to open myself to the world, I can just leave, and that's it, and go from there. So that's this series. And the other series actually is this one. So it's a series of three. It's a series of three that I call the basket and the woman. Still same thing and even now in some countries in Africa, you know, we still have that mentality of women to be submissive, they have to be homemakers, and men have to be breadwinners, something like that. And it's not easy for women right now. So the best way that women find themselves to get that power, to develop that women's empowerment, is to actually focus focus on in the basketry industry, like designing basket to sell, something like that, so they can also contribute in providing for their family along with men, something like that. So they become submissive to whatever they are creating in the basket system industry. And that's also a way to kind of indirectly like bridge the challenge around like women as homemakers and men as breadwinners. So the series is three, this piece actually, and this other one. And also the third one is this piece. So as you can see, I always strive to have that 3D aspect in all the artwork. So I'm trying to feel it. So it just looks more natural or more realistic. You can touch it like if you had a true like basket in front of you, it will feel the same. And also one thing I want to mention is you're going to see almost all my artwork have cowrie shells. It has a meaning actually. The way I grew up in my country, cowrie shell is a meaning of protection. So for me, when someone get a piece or you get a piece, for me, it's not just about buying a piece, it's actually buying a piece that is blessed for you. So that's why I always have like one piece of cowrie shell, at least on each and every artwork, because it's for me, it's a sign of protection, it's a sign of blessing. And the way I do it, I can sometimes I use different techniques. I travel like twice a year to Africa because I want to go there and get, you know, those are some specific items and traditional objects that I use. I can sometimes use a sewing machine to sew some items, but I will still end up sewing everything on the stretch canvas. So most of the time, even if I use a sewing machine, the way I put it on the Canva is I'm going to stretch everything or maybe glue everything so it just stay there on the Canva. So that's my technique. And I use different things like this is a mirror. This is actually wood, things like that. So and a lot of raffia cord. These things I got them from Africa as well. So that's the two about my that's all about this series. And there's a third series actually, this one. So here I'm just showcasing. They say I always ask myself why there's a lot of beautiful things that we do in Africa, like shoes and things like that artisan make. But I never saw those like in any press or anything in the world of fashion. So maybe because we just make them and then at the end of the day they end up in the closet. So how can we make it like, can we make them visible to everyone? So that's why I started this series to have like, this is actually how we do this type of sandals in Africa. So if I remove this piece and we can actually wear it in every dose, but I was just trying to have it on a board. So I mean, so we can hang it, hang it up on the wall rather than just having it stay in the closet or something like that. And so, yeah, my first pieces, I don't know, I closed this back, but for the next pieces, the other pieces, the back is not closed, so people can actually see how I sew everything in. So that's pretty much it. And some of the pieces I do, like simple pieces, for example, like this one, I also have the print available. I will be sharing my screen so I can show you. I also have the print available, but not all of them have like a print available right now. Just some of them have the print available, and that's pretty much in. Most of the time, I'm going to use a lot of fabrics, but the main one are going to be African fabric. And behind each African fabric, there's a story behind. So even when I publish the art, I put the story there. And if someone buy, I'm going to print it well designed so you can attach to your art. So it shows the story behind.